So this is Gleeok, which is a drum sequencer um, slash drum machine. I built some voices into the patch that you're hearing now. It's got uh, the sort of interesting thing about that is that you can mix between different drum sequences. So there are 3 tracks, which I've labeled bass drum, snare drum, and hat, coming out here. Again, this goes out. There's a page for setting MIDI destinations if you want to use it for MIDI. Um, but the tracks. Hold on. There are 3 tracks for each of the 3 drum voices. So there's a track 1 which has bass, snare, hat, and then another sequencer for setting the length, and you do that by placing a gate. You see it starts repeating at that point, and you can set it back to 16 steps by removing the gate. But there's one of each of these sort of sequences for each of the 3 tracks, and rather than selecting between the 3 tracks, you can actually sort of blend between them using probability. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. There's a mix control. There's a mix control. When the mix is at 0, you're hearing track 2. As you move into negative numbers, there's a probability that you'll hear the triggers from track 1. And as you move into positive numbers, you'll hear track 3. So that's what we'll hear now. So at the extremes, it only plays from that track, but at sort of subtle deviations from that, you start getting little changes, little varieties, and in between, things get kind of chaotic. But it's a really interesting way, I think, to sort of blend between different drum tracks. So here I've got it just a little bit between, mostly toward 1, but a little bit toward 0. And so we're getting a little bit of track 2 blended in with track 1, which just adds some variety to track 3, which just adds some variety to it. We've got a swing control. And we can also mute any of the output tracks from this front page. This mutes the sequencer. We can also mute the audio using these switches, and the mutes are set up for left and right channels. It outputs both in both channels, but you can send the voices to one or the other channel if you want to process them separately. Um, so I've isolated the bass drum, but you don't have to do that. And then the rest of the controls up here are for the drum synth voices. You can actually get a fair amount of variety from them, I think. But I modeled them kind of after some stuff in the synth secrets about bass drums and snare drums and hats. They're somewhat consolidated for CPU reasons, but I think they sound pretty good. So if you want to use the internal drum voices, you can, but it also uh, ex uh, exports. It can be used with external sources, either via MIDI or CV. Um, and I'll just point out a couple of other features. You can have it send gates or triggers. Uh, to get triggers, you press the output triggers button over here in the corner. And then finally, this isn't all that exciting in trigger mode because it'll mostly stay high, but in gate mode, we have this fourth output over CV. You could add it over MIDI. I didn't, but you could, which is a not output. So when any of the other gates are high, it's low, and when they're all low, it's high. So you get this other sort of output option for different types of rhythmic opportunities, and that's Gleeok, which I think is sort of like a fun way of getting some variety out of drum beats on the fly. Uh, you know, so there you go.